Okay, we're good to go.
Okay. Well, I will call the meeting to order. My name is Rick Eggers. I'm chair of the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee of Community Board 6. It's May 10th, and the meeting is called to order at 6:33. We are joined tonight by District Manager Jesus Perez and Community Associate Brendan Berth. Brendan's doing doing most of our technical support, and Jesus as well. He's also one of our subject matter experts on the budget. Members of the public, if you can raise your hands raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is time following the committee discussion, we will field questions from the public. But the first questions will always come from members of the committee, followed by other members of the board, and then we will get to the members of the public as we are able. Tonight, Eva-Marie Lassiter is taking minutes. Thank you, Eva-Marie.
I'm here. Yes, I'm taking minutes.
Great, thank you. And this is going to be a little, we're going to have a lot to sort of just note down. Don't worry about it. Minutes don't have to have everything there, but do see if you can catch some of it. I'll try to do some notes myself, and we'll put them all together and come up with some good minutes.
All right.
Okay, you should all have received several emails by now from the board office with the link to a doodle sign-up sheet for minutes for the committee meetings in 2021. For your convenience, the link for this committee is also being posted in the chat right now. At the direction of the board chair, each committee meeting must have a designated minutes taker and a designated backup just in case. To eliminate the guesswork, make sure that you volunteer for as many slots on the doodle sign-up sheet as you can. If more than 2 people sign up for a particular month, the office will make sure to distribute the duties equitably and will let you know in advance which months you are due to take minutes. If you have not already filled out the doodle, please do so right away. The link to the doodle sign-up form is currently in chat, I hope. And so now would be a good time to fill it out. Okay, so we need to have the formal attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Jim Collins. Okay, I don't see Jim here yet. B. Disman.
Present.
Rick Eggers.
Present.
Eva-Marie Lassiter.
Present.
Karen Moore.
Present.
Reshma Patel.
Present.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
Present.
Claude L. Winfield.
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Brendan. Next is the adoption of the agenda. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting this agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing none, the agenda is adopted. Next is the adoption of the minutes. The minutes from the April 12th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. I see no hands. Okay, so the minutes are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB6 website. Okay, we have some official ground rules, and then I have a couple extra to add. In order to have an efficient meeting, no one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participant panel should appear and you should find the raise hand function there. If you still have technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty. We're a small group, we should be able to deal with that. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us of any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing particular information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so you can speak. I do have some difficulty sometimes seeing the hands, so I hope you'll bear with me. And somebody can catch me, Jesus, Brendan, if you could help me make sure that I get hands when they're raised. We are required by executive order to create a verbatim transcript of the meeting. So please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. In general, my procedure is that I will call on the committee members first. Then if there are any other board members present, I will call on them and we'll get to any members of the public after that. We have a list of questions I'm going to be using as kind of the bones of the meeting for the way we're going to proceed. And we'll just take it through that and see how it works. I have to add one extra thing this time of year. We are going to be joined by representatives from elected officials' office. I'd like to remind everybody, not just those people, but everybody on the committee, that there is no campaigning permitted at a community board meeting. We are always grateful to our elected officials for the work that they do on our behalf, but we're not in any way endorsing any particular candidate for any particular office. And enough of that. I'm sure everybody knows how to handle that. Okay, so we're just going to go into the agenda. Now, one of the reasons that we wanted to have this particular agenda was it's been a good length of time since we submitted our district needs statement. We want to get an idea of how well we're doing in progressing towards the district needs, meeting those district needs. We want to be able to give the feedback to the committee chairs so they can follow up. And in turn, they can come back to us and update what needs to be in the next version of the district needs statement. But this is also a time to just sort of celebrate some of the accomplishments that have been made in the district, because there have been some, unlike some years when we have had no movement on any of our budget requests whatsoever. We're getting a little bit of movement, and especially gratifying considering the times that we're in and how much we have, the budget has been under strain. But we are joined by three representatives of elected officials. We're joined by Katie Loeb from Carlina Rivera's office. Katie's the budget director, I think is the right office. Also Budget Director Ben Jacobs from Keith Power's office, and Legislative Director from Ben Kalos's office, Wilfredo Lopez. Now, thank you all for being here. What we've done in past years is the committee chair and the chair of the board sometimes goes and meets with elected officials. This way we have an opportunity to get more feedback from the committee members and hopefully have a little more robust conversation about where things stand. So I have prepared some questions that we sent out in advance to the elected officials and to the committee members. Hope you've had a chance to take a look at them. If not, we understand it's a busy time of year, but we'll try to get to all of them if we can. And one of the things I'd like to start with is I'd like to start with Katie, who at the last full board meeting slipped in some information about a very positive move for something in our district concerning senior centers. And Katie, you really got our attention Um, I wonder if you could just sort of fill us in a little bit on where things stand about senior centers and what we can.
Oh, sorry, Rick. I think you went on mute there. I missed the end.
Yeah, I meant to unmute someone else, but
Okay, well, there you go. I'm not sure where I cut off, but if you could just sort of fill us in on where things stand with the senior center developments and what we can expect in our district, not just Carlita's district comes north to us, but it also goes down into Board 3. So we'd be particularly interested in how it's going to affect our district.
Yeah, well, it's definitely targeted towards CB6. So the mayor made an announcement about increased sort of like expanding senior services within the city, especially as a response to COVID and how the city had to respond and sort of the way that the senior population was impacted really greatly. And a really identified need that you all have been talking about for years that the city kind of finally took up. And they're going to be creating a new senior center or NORC in Community Board 6. So they targeted several neighborhoods throughout the city that lacked senior services for their population. And so it'll go through an RFP through the city, and different social service organizations, community centers, things such as that can submit a proposal for creating a senior center or a NORC within Community Board 6. The mayor announced this and kind of released a lot of information regarding the parameters of it. And so I don't know if they've released the RFP yet, but they're certainly working on it, and it's something that we can expect coming up. And I'll be sure to keep tabs on it, keep everybody updated. Ultimately, it will be awarded through a request for proposal and a public procurement process. So I'm not sure how much impact Community Board 6 will like, if there will be a review process that involves the community board. That hasn't really been released yet, but it will be through sort of a traditional RFP proposal.
So you don't know yet what our role will be in helping to locate it. And do we know whether would be a difference between a senior center and a NORC, which for those who are not familiar with the acronym, it's naturally occurring retirement center, I guess, retirement community.
Yeah.
And those would be two very different approaches. And do we have any more on which is more likely?
No, I don't know at this time. I'm not certain if the city is going to be saying like, tell us, like, give us your proposal for what kind of service you would do in this area, and then selecting from those which seems the best or most appropriate. The initiative is for it's kind of like for both of those services. And they're targeting placing a new either senior center or NORC in one of about a dozen neighborhoods. So CB6 is one of those areas. And I know there's a couple senior centers in Councilman Rivera's side of the district. I'm not sure about north of 35th Street, but it would be the entirety of CB6 would be sort of part of their part of the catchment area, and they would be looking to target like areas that are underserved currently.
Okay. I have one other question for you, and then I'll open it up to the other members of the committee. And I think Ben might know something about the St. Peter's Senior Center, maybe, that's affiliated with Lenox Hill Houses, I believe. But Katie, what's the status of the Stein Center? I haven't really heard much from them.
So at the beginning of COVID, the senior centers, first they pivoted to sort of grab and go meal delivery, and then that stopped, and it was the senior centers' traditional meal delivery was incorporated into the Get Food program. So the centers have been closed, but a reopening date has been announced, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but they should be coming. All the senior centers in the city should be reopening for in-person services soon.
Great. I don't want to take this I don't want to get into too much about the substance of it. That should be done by the subject matter committee. But I do want to get the details so that we can update our district needs. And this is all good info. Before we open it up to other questions, Ben, did you have anything about the St. Peter's location?
No, I don't know the current status. I'm happy
Okay.
to try to figure it out if you like, but it's the senior center at St. Peter's Church that's run by Lennoxville Neighborhood House. It's I imagine they're doing the same sort of food programming that the rest of them are right now. But I hadn't seen an actual date, Katie, but I hope it's soon.
Okay, good. Okay, questions for Katie on senior centers or anything else related to the senior center issue?
I see Claude has his hand raised.
Thank you. Claude.
Yes, I do. Katie, since it's going to be an RFP, and you're proposing two different scenarios, one a NORC and one a senior center, I'm concerned that the community board has adequate input because they're totally different things. NORCs are usually defined to specific developments and not necessarily the whole district, whereas a senior center may apply to seniors throughout our district. So that's just my concern, that we have adequate input into the determination of whether it's a NORC or a senior center. Not a question, but concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely something that I'll bring back to DIFTA. There is they did release a sort of presentation outline that I can send to the board to make sure that they, you all have the full information about DIFTA's plan and all those details. So I'll forward that over to the board now.
That sounds good. Thank you.
And I see Jesus has his hand up.
Thank you, Rick. So Katie, since it is going to be an RFP process, does that mean that if it turns out that no organizations submit an RFP for our area or with a site targeted in our area, then this might not actually come to our district? Or will the city, come hell or high water, find something in our district and do it something in our district?
I think so. The city is targeted neighborhoods, so I think that they would have to get something in the district.
Okay.
I see Karen has her hand raised.
Thank you, Karen. Yes.
So my limited understanding of de Blasio's proposal is that, number one, it's in response, number one, there's going to be some senior centers, including in our district. But then number two, they're going to spend a fair amount of money trying to help people stay in their, age in place as opposed to being institutionalized. On the assumption that when people are institutionalized, costs increase significantly. Katie, is that your understanding of it?
Yes,
Have I
absolutely.
interpreted it correctly? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So there's actually two things going on. One is putting money into senior centers, including probably something in ours. Do you know if the attempt to help people age in place is also in our district, or is that something that's going to be open for RFP? And we'll see if it happens.
Yeah, that is something that is kind of included in how they want to envision the way that senior services are delivered moving forward. So that's also the inclusion of the NORC is a lot to do with that, since that helps people, it brings services directly to buildings with a high senior population. So they do have a lot of different sort of ideas of how to do this, and it's supposed to be a more kind of holistic view of senior services that isn't just, here's a senior center, come to it, eat lunch, go home. It's more engaging than that.
Okay, so when you say they, do you mean the Department for the Aging, or do you mean de Blasio? Can you tell me who they are so we could try to find out what's involved?
Yeah, one and the same. The Department for the Aging
Okay,
telling the mayor what, he's,
and back and forth.
yeah,
Okay, thank you very much.
The
absolutely.
the executive budget came out a couple weeks ago. That's the mayor's last shot before it goes to the city council for a vote. And in that was $39.4 million for what was called the Community Care Plan, which was support for seniors living at home and in communities and staying in their communities. So there's some money allocated, but as Karen was alluding to, it's not designated to necessarily benefit our district, but it might. So we have to sort of stay on top of this one, or actually we'll refer that to the committee to see if they can keep on top of it. I think we've got both some positive stuff and some wait and see stuff to update our district needs on this, to say we really appreciate the fact that they're finally recognizing the need for an additional senior center in our district, and that we want to be involved in the process of helping to locate it and the nature of it. And I don't think that's an unreasonable request. So, okay, anybody else have anything else on senior centers? Okay, let's move on to.
Also, I just looked it up and it looks like they opened today for grab and go meal services. So not full in person, but they're starting to open.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. But one of the things that has always been the case for our particular senior population is that there's a large number of people who don't really feel they need to have the lesser priced meal. But they still need the social interaction and the programming that can go with it. So if this money can be used both for the food and for programming, we'll be in an ideal situation that we haven't been in for the last 20 years. So it's overall, it's very good news.
Rick, can I just add?
Yes.
The Katie, Stein called, they called like once a week, and they did say they're gonna do grab and go this week.
Okay, let's move on to some parks. I have some things to mention from the executive budget. The heading on the slide was clean and green. The budget proposes a CCC kind of effort where the city would have it would be the city cleanup corps, 10,000 new hires for $234 million in fiscal year 22. One of the things that we've been asking for is for better maintenance of the parks, and this would certainly address that issue. And I just wanted to mention that, and that there was money in there for organics and recycling, and there was some money in there for litter basket pickups. But I'd like to turn over the rest of the parks questions to Reshma, who's a member of the Parks Committee and can probably get to the heart of some of the parks issues better than I can certainly ask the question. So Reshma, up to you.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. So, like most years, our city has shortchanged parks in the most recent update that we got in January from OMB. And as a community board, we have majority of our requests are actually from the Parks Committee. And so I'm just going to go through, the questions that we have, and if the representatives from the council members' offices can, help us get some funding for any of these, it would be wonderful. Or any updates of the status of these. So we've asked for more park patrol officers and park maintenance personnel, and at least no cuts in current staffing. And so I don't know if you have any insights on this, how it's being handled in the final budget sessions. Would the council member have money to support safety or maintenance in the parks?
I don't think that's one of the options the Parks Department gives us. because that would come out of the expense budget, and I don't think we can fund personnel directly there for parks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in terms of in the executive budget, so we do know that there's going to be increased funding for, like Rick mentioned, the city cleanup corps. The executive budget hearing process has just gotten underway. We've only had a couple hearings under our belt. So the councilwoman is a supporter of the New Yorkers for Parks asks, which is to increase funding for PEP enforcement patrol, Parks Enforcement Patrol, or PEP, maintenance workers, seasonal, both seasonal and permanent. And so we saw a lot of those asks get into the council's preliminary budget response. And that means that during the executive budget hearing, we're going to see how many, like dollar for dollar, how it aligns with our requests. So unfortunately, I don't have an update. I do think that there is room for optimism given the federal funding, and also the state budget was very generous to us in terms of schools for once. So there's a little more money that we have from city revenues to fund that kind of thing. So I'm hoping that there's going to be more. It's certainly something that we're going to advocate for, and it's something to keep. I will be watching for in the executive budget hearing.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else have any comments on that? Otherwise, we'll move to the next question.
I just had one real quick. You're talking about spending, the stimulus spending, and I apologize, everybody. I was having some technical issues. I couldn't find my invitation. I didn't see it. But it would seem to me that the stimulus money is just going to be a one shot. So I would think you would want something that would be sustainable spending with a revenue stream to protect it. And I'm just wondering what all you're contemplating for that in terms of what Reshma had asked.
Yes, the stimulus spending, a lot of it is it's either one-off or it's multi-year. Like, they announce it's like you get $10 billion until 2024. So there is some stability built in. And then in terms of looking at more like stable revenue sources, the state has built in with their budget when it passed, they built in a phase-in of revenue increases over the next 3 years to cover. So this is specifically around education spending, to cover the education spending to meet the sort of increased spending that they did for education. So that's really important from a city perspective, because over the past several years, we've seen the state cut education and health spending. And what the city does is we pick up that tab, which means that we use our general fund, the city tax levy, to pay for those services that the state has kind of underfunded. And so now that the state has kind of created a mechanism by which it will be supported year over year, there will be more balances. And I think something that you bring up about the stimulus being one time is also really important to note, because there's a lot of programs like the city cleanup corps that aren't really planning to be extended year over year, but that I'm sure if there's an increase in like parks maintenance and stuff, that is stuff that we would want to continue to fund and see funded. So we will have to look at, how is our city recovering economically? Are we recapturing any the property tax decreases, the personal income tax decreases, the kind of things that we've seen recently as a result of the pandemic, and what we're going to see moving forward. So that's keeping our eyes on it as always, but appreciating that, this year we're going to have that funding and we can kind of see that going.
Okay, thank you.
Katie, can I ask, did you just say that the cleanup corps was not intended to be more than a year?
Yeah, I believe it's like a job creation program to employ people, but then the hope is that they then get jobs in the private sector. And I think some will be maintained, but it is definitely, it was announced for fiscal year 22.
Okay, and so far there was no contemplation that it be authorized for future fiscal years. Okay.
Not to my knowledge, though. I could be incorrect, just only, being stuck in budget season. But to my knowledge, it's a 1-year program.
Yeah. I was just thinking that that's one thing that we might recommend to the committee, to the Parks Committee, that they might consider whether it should be something that should be an annual, a permanent thing that that's committee business.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because if it's happening for FY 2022 and they're hiring 10,000 people, I mean, there's going to be a time to ramp it up. And so only having a year for it seems like a short time frame, because by the time you get the people hired, trained, I mean, it makes sense, more people are using the parks now than ever before, right? And so with the economy stabilizing and people going back to work, maybe we have less need to in future years, but that's something we need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also worth mentioning the cleanup corps is not just going to be parks. That's certainly part of it, but I think there's multiple agencies who are going to receive new employees for it. And I'm sure certain elements hopefully will be maintained, or maybe, certain elements don't need to continue. It was really just necessary to kind of like get us back on our feet and get going. So it is definitely something that we'll continue to monitor.
All right, well, thank you, Katie. So the next question is, we had asked for improvements and repairs to Astor Levy Recreation Center. So what's the status of Astor Levy in relationship to the ESCR plans? And is there any interest in funding from the council member's office, and recognizing that the ESCR has actually been delayed a bit as well?
Well, the ESCR on the for Project Area 2 hasn't really been delayed. I mean, it's going to take a few months more than they thought it would, but it pretty much started on time in the fall at Astor Levy Playground. If anyone's been there, it's they are actively working on it. They're putting in the foundation for the seawall. It's all very exciting. Astor Levy Rec Center, the pre-pandemic plan was to have it open throughout. The plan, it's not under construction as part of ESCR. It can be open, pandemic. I don't think any rec center in the city is open as far as I'm aware. But the pools should be open this summer if pools are open, but that won't be ESCR related at all. There were a few different projects within the Astor Levy Rec Center, it being, a built as a bathhouse over 100 years ago. There are a few things it needs. I think the HVAC, there's a HVAC program that was funded already. There's a ADA accessibility ramp that was already funded. And I know that I believe Councilmember Howard's put in funding for new exercise equipment in the previous fiscal year. So those are all projects that were already funded. I don't know if there were other things that that CB6 was looking at in terms of upgrades for the rec center itself, but those are all in the works. And then a lot of and this will be a theme, I believe, of this section, is a lot of the projects were on hiatus and paused during the pandemic. So getting the actual time frame there and updated and all that is easier than it is, more difficult than it sounds, but that's where we are.
No, thank you. Yeah, we were aware of the HVAC, and we moved that over to continuing funding from our capital needs request. But thank you for the detail on all the other items.
Yeah, the ramp, we were pushing, this is pre-pandemic last year, pushing City Hall to try to accelerate that on the park's end in hopes of using the rec center as an early voting site. And unfortunately, we were able to get the Brookdale campus established as an early voting site, which I believe it is again for most of CB6. If because I think that came out today, and I just plugged in a couple addresses. It looks like everything above 20th Street, as far as I could tell, in CB6 will be voting at Hunter Brookdale. But I'm not campaigning, just informing.
No, that's fine.
That's another issue that we have in our committee, that having more early voting sites in our district. So it's an important issue for us. So the next question, and this is something that we've had, in our request for a while, and I think has become much more important in this last year, which is Comfort Station at Murphy Brothers Park. And the agency said that we should look to our elected officials for funding of this.
The agencies have outdated information because we got that funded as part of the SCR. So
Okay.
yeah, really proud of that one. We got that as one of the commitments. Keith pushed for that one pretty hard, and it was months and months and months of meetings where it's no, maybe, yes, and then it will go in there when they're working on Murphy Brothers, which they'll be doing after they're halfway through Psycho. So we're still, I think, a year and a half off from that at least.
How comfortable are you with that? Actually, the money still being there by the time it comes around. Is it something we should keep on our district needs, or should we say that it's been funded?
It's funded. It's in the commitment letter, the same as the dog parks that we got from Murphy Brothers Playground as well. I mean, those are both solid commitments that are active parts of the plan. I don't want to say a new mayor and administration can't come in and tell they reverse anything, but I don't actually know how that works. But I assume they won't.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I guess we should move it to continuing because, I mean, thanks to the, federal aid and state aid, we're not in a situation where things are being cut, but we could, in case we end up in that kind of situation ever again, right? It's better to keep these things on until it's done.
Yep, absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt, but I see that Jesus has his hand raised.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Ben, might we be able to get a copy of that commitment letter? Because the last time we checked in with DDC and Parks about this was October 28th, 2020. And they confirmed that the comfort station for Murphy Brothers Park was not part of the ESCR work, as the ask came too late for them to make it into the Project Area 2 construction package. But they said that the ESCR project would leave a space in the park where a comfort station and water meter connection could subsequently be built at a future date, but as a completely separate project. And that they said, unless something has happened since October 28th, 2020, that there is no funding for the comfort station.
No, I think they were probably giving you outdated information there, because that was their line for like a year as we were asking for this thing, was that they were going to put up the hookups for it, but not the actual comfort station. But then we got the commitment for the comfort station before the project was approved. So please forward me that email, and I'll be happy to send you the commitment letter.
Will do.
And have words with DDC as necessary.
I'm sure it was an honest mistake.
No, that's exactly the line that they were using before it was actually approved. So I'm sure it's in there somewhere. No, we'll just talk to them about it.
Okay, we'll send you that email.
Thanks.
Thanks for bringing that up, Jesus, because I remember we've had so many conversations about these comfort stations. So that's why I was surprised to hear that had already been funded. And so the next is video cameras for both Bellevue Park South and for Dag Hammarskjöld. And, we actually have moved this on our last Parks Committee meeting. We moved this district needs over to the newly formed Public Safety Committee, just so everyone is aware of that classification now. And these are multi-year requests. And so, if there's any support for this, the community groups, the Friends of the Parks, the Dag Hammarskjöld Park has really had a lot of issues with security in this park and has wanted these cameras there for some time.
We had the Dag Hammarskjöld, we had that on our participatory budgeting ballot a couple of years ago, and it didn't receive that much support. I'm not sure what the status is, but I believe the cameras at the time were for a new entrance that was going to be built as part of the overall remodeling of the park and the garden. That project has significant budget issues. I think Parks has put that out for RFP a couple times, and it's coming over budget, and they were asking for more money for it. And I really need to talk to Parks and try to get a handle on what's happening there, because that's a project that Councilmember Karodnik had funded. So I'm not sure that the cameras are really the top priority here, but the project itself for Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza is of concern.
Okay, I see Brian has his hand up.
Hi. Yeah. So when it comes to Dag Hammarskjöld and Bellevue South, and also while we're here talking about it, about the cameras and the security entry for the Strauss houses across the street. So we've been requesting that stuff from CB6 for at least 5 years, and in some of these cases, close to a decade. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing is that I know 2020 or 2021 was a really tough budget year for all this stuff. I think it's like super important to get this stuff done ASAP, and it is security cameras and doors. And if it's not done soon, it just makes a mockery of the whole community board concept for the whole city and the district needs thing. I mean, like, and the thing is, the community board, it's not our place to have to search out grants and like dig up the money from the feds or anything like that. I don't think it's the council members necessarily like office staff job to do that either. But like our position on this is that like us having to ask this much really just kind of illustrates that this process isn't working.
Well, it might not be that the process isn't working, but like, what does the local precinct say?
The process isn't working, and we honestly really like, we have a cordial relationship with the precinct, but like they're not here in our meetings, and that says a lot.
Sure, but you know, I sure.
I don't. I'm sorry. I don't know what the precinct says about it. I do see on the citizen report that there are regular criminal activity and in Bellevue South Park. I can't.
I mean, one of the things here is that, you know, to get this stuff installed, we know that the dollar amounts are pretty high. Like, we know that it's not like go down to Best Buy and buy a Wise camera or something like that. However, you know, we're talking so much in the news lately too about how there's been an increase in crime, although there hasn't really been an increase in crime because major crimes are flat, and how everybody's worried about how the city is unsafe. And we have these areas where we've identified these problems, and we want these sensitive areas to be as safe as they possibly can. And we've been asking for it for years. And here we are presenting it. And the answer is no, we need to hire 1,000 more cops. It's ridiculous.
Okay.
I can speak to just the specifics of Bellevue South Park. The tree cover doesn't allow for camera visibility, unfortunately. But in terms of Strauss houses, our office has funded new doors. We funded seed funding last year to get the design and scope kind of worked on by NYCHA. They said that they needed additional funding, and we're putting it in this year.
That's appreciated. And thank you to your council member too, who's been very clear about public safety stuff. I think all the council members have answered this to some extent, and this again is not your office's fault, and it's not your specific boss's fault, but it just needs to be said out loud that this is like now top priority stuff for us. And this is stuff that the leadership of this board has talked about and has said that if we're adding something on that's only a year or two old and funding is hard to get for it, and it doesn't look like it's super high priority, like, we get it. But these are the super high priority things, including the safety of these parks and the safety of these nearby facilities that I think is considered top priority. And I think the other committee members could back that up.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Brian, for that, and thank you, Ben and Katie, for the updates. The next question is on library funding, and we'd asked for repairs, computer upgrades, and additional resources. So we want to know, if you have any input on funding for libraries, if you've heard what they might need, and any insight on when they'll, reopen with full services. It's kind of interesting. Someone who lives in the district who came to one of the full board meetings made this comment where he was upset that the libraries weren't open when he's, even though there's a pandemic, that he was still paying taxes, and there was no libraries open in our district, but they were in certain other districts. And when he got in touch with someone at the New York Public Library, you know, that person said, well, they get most of their funding not from the city, but through private donors. So they don't really need to listen to him, which I thought was a horrible answer to give somebody. And I just want to bring that up.
Yeah, there was a gentleman who was contacting our office about something. I don't know if it's the same person, but he was very rude to one of my coworkers. And, you know, I can only imagine the things that he says to the library staff. The mayor, I think, made an announcement this morning that a lot of the libraries are going to be reopening. It's not all of them at once, but I believe it's happening very soon. And I just saw the list quickly, the two that were sort of in the CB6 area. I believe the Epiphany Library was on there, and the 53rd Street Library, which is in CB5. But, you know, it's a very nice library.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, probably was the same person because he came to a full board meeting during the public session. So. Does anyone else have any questions on libraries or any comments?
And then, you know, we've been asking the public library system if there are projects that we can fund in terms of capital projects. The last couple of years, they have said that we can't and that there are no projects to fund. You know, we have more districts, more libraries in our district than any other council district in the entire city. So we would love to do that. I also just want to note that I believe at some point soon, probably in the next couple months, there will be a reopening of the Mid-Manhattan Library, which is probably in CB5 because that's on 5th.
Yeah,
It also has a new name. It's named after some rich person's foundation, which I'm not going to commit to memory, but it's you know, the Mid-Manhattan branch. That's the research branch that's on across from the main branch.
Yes, the big one. Yeah. All right, so the next question is on the renovations for the 54th Street Recreation Center.
Sorry to interrupt, Reshma, but I see Jesus has his hand raised again.
Hi, thank you. Similar to what Ben just reported, the last time, this was about a year ago, the last time we asked the library what they wanted, whether there are any capital projects that in our district that we can help advocate for, they said the same thing. They said, just advocate for our budget to be baselined and we'll be good. So I don't know if this is a new posture for them or what's going on, but we haven't asked for this year, but it'll be interesting to see if they say the same thing.
okay.
All right, and then so getting to the next question, it's on about renovations at the 54th Street Recreation Center, and you know, we had referred them to the elected officials to get funding for this. I think this was perhaps a question for Councilmember Kalos's office. So, is there any interest?
That's in our district.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's in Councilmember Power's district. So I'll let Ben speak to it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, in the 54th Street Rec Center, there are a few things that it needs, but we're talking millions of dollars worth of capital repairs, so it's beyond the scope of something that we could fund directly out of our council office. You know, it was, you know, we go to the agencies and we ask them for the different projects that they're prioritizing, what they need. The Parks Department actually didn't give us the list of the projects until literally the day it was due and we were making our final decisions. And then a lot of the projects that they gave us, I mean, this one especially, I think was over $2 million worth of stuff for Rec Center 54. So that's just that's of the 5 million that we get as a council office.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things in that rec center was the elevators not working properly, which is an important issue, right? Because we want it to be ADA accessible.
I think the elevator might have been, I don't think it's been replaced, but I think it's been repaired so that it, or I mean, that was over a year ago since it's been open, but I think the elevator functions at least. And I know that we worked with the recreation department within parks to get them new ping pong tables because there was a very active ping pong league there. And we had, I think, also funded some new gym equipment, but again, that we're talking, you know, in like the $100,000 range, not like the $2.7 million range.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else from the committee have questions on the rec center? we'll move on to the last question from the Parks Committee side of things. And, and I think this is, I know Keith had already been working on this pre-pandemic, this issue of planting new trees in our district. And should we continue to make that a priority or not? Because it had been there and then there was an effort to plant more trees in the district.
Yeah, and I know that as part of ESCR, there's an effort to plant a ton of trees in CB3 and CB6. More in the CB3 area because of all the tree loss for East River Park, and more in the lower half of CB6. But we have Councilor Powers has funded tree planting throughout our district. I know that some of that was in the northern portion of CB6 as well. I don't know how many trees are outstanding there, but if I mean, everyone's for planting more trees. I just don't know where the exact needs are, and if you guys or any of the groups within CB6 have details on those, always happy to take a look.
Okay, so we'll get, we had, this is, before the pandemic started, right, where we had collected areas where trees had fallen and stuff, and we had provided that to the office to say, this is where we want to have trees. And then that kind of got sidelined. So we probably need to go back and look at that.
Yeah, and for the executive budget review, council's called for the increase in funding for what's called stump removal, which might be to address the fallen tree kind of issue where there's just a stump in a tree pit, but we want that gone and a fresh tree there. So that's something we've got our eye on in terms of the executive budget hearing. So hopefully that will be restored as well.
Yeah, stumps, and then there were also trees that had overgrown so much that the sidewalks were uneven and people were having a hard time walking on them, especially if somebody could trip on it. It was so uneven. Yeah. All right, well, that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Rick to go through.
I will. Yeah, well, I want to just sort of touch base on time. My intention was to have us close at 8, so I want to move us along. So I will spend a little bit of time on the public restrooms issue, a little bit on housing, and then we'll kind of do a lightning round on the miscellaneous ones. A yes, no, not interested, yes, let's see what we can do. One of the things that came up in this last go around of the budget that was new to us was the issue of having more public restrooms available. Our issue came up through the Housing and Homelessness Committee, because people who were, during the pandemic, there was no place for someone who didn't have a home to go. So people were complaining that there was urination and other less favorable activity going on in the parks when there was really nothing for these people to do. They had no place to go. And it became an issue that I think there was a lot of passion behind. In CB5, they're looking at it in a broader context and just having public restrooms available where they aren't now. I wondered how any of the 3 council members we're addressing this issue, whether it's something that you're paying attention to, something that has not been an issue for you, or anything you wanted to comment about public restrooms.
Yeah, so DOT has these public restrooms. There's actually one, it's the only one that ever got used in New York City in Madison Square Park. And so I know that our office connected with the board probably 2 years ago now. And we tried to connect with DOT about how to place them, in strategic locations where people would need them, either close to parks or close to areas that are heavily trafficked where people would need to use the bathroom. I don't know, we own them, we have them, we keep asking for them. I believe the board directly asked DOT for this. I wish I had a better answer as to why they're not being deployed. I know that plumbing is a concern. These are kind of tapped into the sewer lines. And so maybe in the density of Manhattan, there's not really a lot of places to hook up to a sewer line with one of these public restrooms, but it's definitely definitely something that we advocate for and, you know, are glad to raise our voices in that chorus.
Okay. Either of the other offices interested in public restrooms in your part of the district?
Sure, of course. But I had actually heard, and this is pre-pandemic, but we had gotten a complaint from a parent in CB6 would take their kid to one of the parks. I don't think we actually talk about a ton. MacArthur Playground, which is in the Turtle Bay area, which near the FDR, which has a bathroom, and she would say that there were folks who would very frequently, you know, who were driving professionally, who would just pull over and then go into the bathroom in and out while her kids were playing and all that. And she was concerned on that level. But yeah, we obviously need more bathrooms that are more accessible.
Jesus found the bathroom.
Yeah.
in the shared screen there.
There you go. Yeah, that's Madison Square Park. That's not MacArthur Park.
This is the one that Katie
Oh, that's the one that exists. Yeah.
That's the one that exists.
Alluding to.
Yeah.
And we've passed along some information of CB5's activities on this score to our transportation committee. They've had some very full agendas, so maybe over the summer they will have a chance to take a look at it. Because CB5 has been actively trying to work with DOT. They found like the person at DOT who is in charge of this particular program. And because the contract runs out in a couple of years, they want to make sure not to let it lapse without citing at least a few more of these things. Apparently the citing criteria are very complicated. And so they are seeking DOT's help in trying to find some of these locations, because if the community board just sort of walks around and, oh, that corner has space, that corner has space, we have no idea what's going on underneath the street. So that makes all the difference. So hopefully teaming up with CB5, CB6 can also claim some of these and have them installed before the contract with JC Deco lapses.
Okay.
So very quickly on this point, pre-pandemic, I want to say budget 2019, we question parks about construction projects for bathrooms in the parks, specifically in our district, but across the city. Apparently, a lot of the issue comes from the cost of building these. The cost overruns have been going significantly over. So they're looking at other solutions in order to cut costs. Now, we're planning on asking this question again at the executive hearing this year to see if there's been any movement. But one of the thoughts, and it was reported, was that they were looking at the solutions that exist in Boston and Oregon, where you have like they're like see-through when they're unoccupied, and then they go fully covered up when someone locks the door. And these, are portable. They can be placed anywhere, and they cost significantly less. So it helps address both the cost concern and the potential safety issues of having public bathrooms. But unfortunately, we were never able to follow up after 2019, partly because of the pandemic. This wasn't a priority with all the costs cuts that happened last year to Parks Department, but it is something that we are continuing to inquire about. The council member cares a lot about this issue. So, they've been used in the city before. They bring these things out whenever there's a concert at Governor's Island, or whenever there's the concerts at Randall's Island. They bring these trailers out that are see-through and then turn completely opaque when occupied. So the city does have experience with them.
Well, it sounds like there's a need to have a more robust conversation at the committee level. I know that we need to also refer this to Housing and Homelessness Committee, which is where it came up for our district needs originally, not just transportation. So we can refer it back to those committees and get their update over the summer about how they want to deal with it in the district needs statement. Okay, let's move on to maybe
Jim has a question.
Oh yeah. Oh, Jim.
Not so much a question as a suggestion. And I've used it any number of times, and I hate Starbucks coffee because it's burnt. But Starbucks allows free use of their restroom to anybody. And I'm thinking perhaps maybe there might be a legislative solution here by saying that any restaurant that has, say, 15 or more locations in the city of New York be required to use be required to allow free access to the bathroom for anybody who happens to be wandering by. I mean, you don't want to do this. You don't want to stick a small business with it, a guy that runs the deli, because it's just too much. But, if there's a Chipotle or a McDonald's or a whatever, why not mandate that if they've got 15 or more restaurant locations in the city of New York, that they be mandated to allow free use of the bathroom. I used a Starbucks bathroom today up at 35th Street, I think it was. So
I think
just a suggestion.
I think we're heading into too much information here. Thanks, Jim. Well, that's something that's an interesting approach. Okay, let's move on to, let's see if there's anything else with housing and homeless. If I remember correctly, there's been, and it might be again in Councilmember Rivera's district, something moving on supportive housing. Katie?
Yeah, so we know that there's interest in turning one of the hotels that's been used as a temporary shelter into permanent supportive housing. And we've, I believe it's been, I hope at least that the organization behind that has reached out to the board and is starting discussions on that, because, Councilwoman Rivera really thinks that we need to be spending our money on permanent housing solutions instead of letting the sort of temporary shelter system cycle people through and have them spend all this time in these unstable settings instead.
Can you lower your voice?
Housing. So, if there's any opportunity to do that and it seems appropriate for the community, I think that would definitely be something that's very exciting, especially if it then changes how the system is oriented to be more about connecting people with that permanent housing versus cycling through these unstable settings. And there's a piece of legislation that the councilwoman has signed on to that would increase housing vouchers. A lot of the housing vouchers are set far below a market rate, certainly for Community Board 6, but pretty much anywhere in the 5 boroughs, it becomes very difficult. And I believe Councilmember Powers is a sponsor on correct me if I'm wrong, on a source of income discrimination bill. Yep. That would then make it so that landlords couldn't reject you because you're using, it's called a city FEPS voucher, that they couldn't reject you if you're using that. And I think those kind of pieces moving is really important for that permanent housing and that stability and that. So hopefully those legislative items are moving forward. And, definitely, I don't think in CB6, but I know the councilwoman has funded supportive housing projects in Community Board 3 that came to our office asking for support. And I also connected the Seafarers Hotel with Breaking Ground to both stabilize their operations while also providing stabilization beds for people who are entering into the shelter system from a high needs area, whether it's mental health services or other kind of health services. So they had a contract there to kind of, work on those issues. Not funding on our end, but definitely, hopefully starting to really think seriously about addressing the long-term solutions on the homelessness crisis.
And I think there are actually plans to build long-term supportive housing focused on homeless populations in CV6 at the. I'm not announcing something with the new Province shelter, right? The people know about that already?
Is it 46th Street?
Yeah.
Yes, we know about it.
Great. So that's going to have, I think it's something like 150 units of supportive housing, and they're going to be with a whole new facility. So that's very exciting, and it should be happening in the next few years.
Well, great. We've got some progress then with that.
Oh, there you go. Sorry.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay.
We should advertise spoiler alerts at this meeting, especially when Ben's around.
Well, I hadn't been involved in enough CV6 business to know whether I just heard that bandied about, in terms of staff meetings at the office. I didn't know whether that was a thing that everyone knew about yet. So, but I'm glad you do, because it's a great project.
Well, I think the office is just showing off that they're on top of it. That's good. It's good to know that we got that information and everybody is sort of aware of it. Okay, let's go into our lightning round here. Over the past few years, there have been all sorts of attempts to have parking for interborough buses to get them off our streets and into someplace else. Anybody seen any movement in that in your council office? I think it was mostly in either Carlina's or Keith's.
It's right on the border. You're talking about the stretch of 2nd Avenue around the tunnel, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So the border between our districts is 35th Street. So it's right, because that would be the route that I would take the M15 down from our office on 43rd to NYU Dental for CV6 meetings, and it was frequently delayed by all the parked buses in the bus lanes. No, I mean, I haven't heard anything about that. I think that would require like NPA to come to the table in a big way, and it's a recurring problem. I don't have any solutions right now. Always open to hearing solutions if anyone has them.
Well, I know that they did a walk around and they proposed a number of different locations, but how far that actually, there's only so much we can do. We can identify certain areas, and if they're not willing to identify them as such, we probably won't see anything until we get back up to speed on traffic. When the city comes back to full force and the traffic increases, it already feels like it's already back to normal. But if it goes back to having parked buses in the bike lanes and all, it's going to be a problem. Okay, we have conflicting information about the bridge that goes over to Waterside and whether the construction there has been completed, whether there's more anticipated. Anybody on top? Any new information about that?
No.
Okay.
Is the short answer, but I think that discussion will be had as a larger discussion with the Brookdale campus, is how this administration intended it. Depending on what the New York Times says, I guess we'll see how the next administration wants to handle it.
Okay. I think we can just skip the 2nd Avenue subway question. We know we're not going to get anywhere with that.
Leave it in my will.
The research lab space, did not get, wasn't there something in the last few months about an additional research facility, like a wet lab of some kind?
It's not in CB6 though. It's in CB5 on Park Avenue South. It's called the Cure Building, and I don't know if it's open yet or if it's opening, but it is a wet lab and life science building. It was a collaboration between Deerfield and EDC. So yeah, we're really excited about it. Just one block to the west.
Well, that's okay. That's on the border has business implications to our district, so that's good.
There is stuff that EDC did at the Alexandria Center in terms of like, I think it was a testing lab or something.
Was there an expansion? I think there was some kind of expansion there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe they built a third building. I haven't been over there in over a year, but they were going to be building a third building there. But I think within the existing space, because I know the Councilmember Powers went out there with the president of the EDC at some point in the fall when they were ramping up testing in a big way. I believe it was another city testing lab, but I'm not sure about those details.
Okay. Noise complaints. Have you started? Have the council members started hearing noise complaints again?
For us, it never stopped. It actually increased during the pandemic because everyone realized how noisy our homes are during the day. But yeah, a lot of the noise that we're getting complaints are construction related. And also, I don't know if this is happening as far south of our side of CD6, but First and Second Avenue are having issues at night with motorcycles riding up and down. So I know there's been a bump in increase as the weather gets nicer there.
Is there anything that the council members can do to help this issue? We've been hammering on about the fact that you make a complaint and then they investigate it the next day when the complaint doesn't even exist anymore, but it'll come up that night again. Has anything been done about that? Anybody following up on that?
Got two things on that. One is that and actually a lot of the complaints are still being, and this applies for noise complaints, but also for like homeless outreach requests. If you do that through one, a lot of that routes erroneously to NYPD, and then it's auto closed out because that's how the system used to work. It no longer does. I know our office has been in touch with Do It, the City Department of Information Technology, who administers the 301 system to try to get that fixed up and working again. But we've also introduced legislation. I don't know the bill number at all, but it was my idea from a few years ago, so I'm excited about it. A legislation to make DEP inspections public. You know, how you can follow up on inspections online for DOB and HPD and a number of other city agencies. But DEP, who enforces the noise code, you know, sometimes you'll get an inspection there and then it's just gone, or you know, you hear about it. And this would be a way to sort of follow up there and try to find out what's been happening. You can see, hopefully there would be some way where you can look up either on a map or search by address to find if there were inspections like at a construction site or at a particularly loud bar or restaurant or something like that, were for violations of the noise code, and if those inspections occurred.
There's a situation between First and Second Avenue every night at 3 o'clock on 25th Street. They're like routine. The carting guys come, and I don't know if it wakes up the whole neighborhood, but it's a regular occurring over and over every night, 3 o'clock.
Is it DSNY or is it private carting? Do you know?
I think it's probably private carting because they come at those hours early in the morning.
You know, the ways, a couple of ways that we've tried to, and Katie, your office has probably done this too, but for the private carters, I forget the name of the agency that's tasked with regulating the private carters. It's a very obscure name.
Business Integrity Commission.
The Business Integrity Commission. We contacted them to try to get the private carters in line.
Yeah, Claude, email me.
I will do.
Okay, sounds like we still are going to have to deal with it, and the district needs yet again.
Can I just suggest one other thing?
Yep, I'm sorry, I missed your.
No, that's all right. I just clicked it. I think both the NYPD and the 311 respondents need to do some kind of an automated customer survey the same as you would get if you contacted your service provider, your internet service provider, or anybody else. Just say, you know, the question was resolved, it was not resolved. Just an automatic callback to the phone number that placed the call originally, and just try to assess some kind of level of customer service, because I've had numerous instances where I've called 311 and even 911, and the situation was not resolved, and you call back and it's a whole new case. I think when you call 311 or you call 911, you should be given a ticket number the same as you would at with a software support system. I mean,
you are given a SR number, which I was just going to note that make sure you log those. If you are making your noise complaints through the app or through the website, it automatically emails it to you. And you can follow up with any of the council offices. If you give us that number, we're able to track down that service ticket and get specific information from that service ticket.
But shouldn't they call you back, or like I say, it's do it with machine?
A lot of it is automated. In my previous apartment, I probably filed 15 311 notifications daily for various issues. And I would just get an email response within, they would tell you the time frame. If it was like, within 24 hours, if it's an emergency issue like heat, gas, or water, or up to 30 days if it's something that's less of a critical issue. And then what typically happens is whatever agency is responding will respond to it. So if it's a housing issue, like there's a repair issue, they'll send out an HPD inspector if HPD has jurisdiction there. If not, it'll be DOB. They'll conduct an inspection and they'll tell you what the resolution is. If it's a violation and a citation was given, they'll tell you. Or if no fault found, they'll also tell you that as well. So the one thing I could say is, 311 calling it is, the easiest thing to do, but using the app is actually a little bit easier and a lot easier to track because you don't have to write anything down. It's all saved right there in the application. You can also do the same thing on the website. It's just a little bit easier to follow up on our end, and also on your end, it's easier to track what's happening.
No, I haven't used the app yet. I wasn't even aware that there was an app.
Yeah, if nothing else, it also tells you what alternate side parking is. If you have a car, it's very useful just for that one reason only.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to move it along because I have
8 o'clock.
Just a couple more. We got the time, and we've also had a very patient member of the public who is still here and has a question she'd like to raise. So I'd like to give her that opportunity as well. But let's get these last couple things. Litter baskets. I know the council members sometimes fund additional litter baskets. I think there was some money in the executive budget for increased sanitation runs. Anybody want to talk about the litter basket situation?
So if it's in our district and you don't have a brand new can, let me know what intersection and we will try to facilitate that. We set aside money every budget for litter baskets, and we've been successful in getting almost 96% of the litter baskets swapped out over the last 7.5 years. So if it's in our side of the district, let me know, and I'll help facilitate that. In terms of sanitation pickups, we had this issue with CB11. So I did some research for them, and the answer I got back is they are prioritizing it based on population density. So if you look at the actual budget, CB8 has 3 times more money allotted than CB6 or CB11. So we are fighting for that in this year's budget. We want equity across because we don't think that their projections are accurate. So that's been one thing. So hopefully we can get some resolution on that, but we're hoping to increase the money that's being pumped in order to increase the frequency of litter pickup.
Great. Anybody else have a quick comment on that?
Yeah, and 33 million was added for composting. So that's curbside and expansion of community compost.
Okay. Which is also an issue that Keith is interested in, as well as Carlina. So, okay. Graffiti removal. We've seen some things, some nice efforts between the police departments and volunteers in the community. Have the council members gotten involved in any of this?
Our
Yes.
office, oh, go ahead, Katie, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say EDC used to have a $3.5 million program that did sort of proactive graffiti removal on private property. So they had, as if you were a property owner, you could kind of sign up for this program and then they would go around and clean the graffiti. That was cut in last year's budget. We're advocating to restore it, and I'm waiting to hear back from EDC if that is specifically part of their piece of the cleanup crew. And hopefully it will be restored. We'll find out during the executive budget hearings.
And just to add, NYPD through their PAL program, as well as through their community affairs unit, has been partnering up with NYCHA developments and also NYCHA as an agency to clean up high graffitied areas. Like they've basically found like the top 50 areas in and around different parts of New York City and are targeting those first. So our office donated paint, and I went out as a volunteer a few Saturdays ago. I think it was, I want to say around April 10th, and participated in one of those cleanups north in East Harlem, where I actually live, just north of, it was like 3 or 4 blocks north of our district. But they're looking to expand that. I would suggest partnering with your local precinct council in order to, help them highlight which of those areas, or if you need help with that, our offices can help facilitate that conversation. If there are specific areas that, you're having that issue, we can flag it for them and hopefully get them on, on the list of areas they're going to target for the summer.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's see. I'd like to go now to.
Excuse me?
Yes.
This is Brendan. Just to quickly interject, since I've been the individual in the CD6 office working a lot on graffiti issues.
Oh, good.
Yes. So just on an individual case-by-case basis, whenever a constituent has reached out to CD6 about graffiti issues, we've made sure to, in our communication with a constituent, include an email called graffiti@nypd.org in that email. And that's the email for the NYPD's graffiti removal efforts. And they've been very communicative with our office about making sure that the correct location can be identified and that graffiti is removed. So I just thought I'd add that additional little bit of context
Thank you.
terms of partnerships with the NYPD and graffiti.
Great. Thank you, Brendan. Okay. I do want to hear from, if she's still on, Miss Gail Haft, who has a question about something. Let's see, cameras and Citibank rules. Ms. Haft, are you still on?
I'm here.
Great. You now
hear me?
You
Can you hear me?
We can, and you now have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm a resident of Sutton Place, and I've lived here very happily for 15 years. I'm very concerned about the city bikes riding on the sidewalk in the neighborhood. which should not be allowed. In addition to city bikes, messengers, and just anybody who has a bike thinks that it's okay to ride on the sidewalk, and it's not. Pedestrians have the right of way, and in particular, we should have the I don't know how to exactly express it, but I don't want to have to go out every day and worry that I'm going to be knocked over by somebody on a bike. So I think we need rules, and people who take city bikes out at the city bike stations should have to sign an agreement, and there should be a regulation that not only they should not be allowed to ride on sidewalks, but they cannot go the wrong way on one-way streets. They cannot go through lights. There are no rules. It's like the Wild West in my community in Sutton Place. And I would appreciate it if community board could do something about it, and if our council members could also pass some regulations. Thank you.
Yep. I'll address this very quickly. Everything you just stated is already against the law. They're basically riding a bicycle in New York City and New York State. You're subject to the same laws that someone who is driving a vehicle is subject to. So you can't go the wrong way against traffic. You cannot ride on sidewalks unless you're under the age of 12. And even then you have to be, accompanied by an adult. All these things in terms of regulations exist. The issue is with enforcement. Obviously in a perfect world, there would be a bike patrol officer in every single block that would be able to manage this, but that's not the reality. We have our office over the past 7.5 years, we funded for a full-time bike patrol officer to help encourage bike safety in the 19th precinct, which doesn't exactly cover Sutton Place. I believe you're part of the 17th precinct there. But we funded it with some success in terms of making bike lanes a little bit safer, and making sure that people are practicing good bike hygiene, as in wearing helmets. For the delivery workers, all of our offices have been involved in sponsoring trainings and providing them with all the safety materials they need: free helmets, free vests, free bells, free lights. And the compliance has gotten better, I will say, but it's still not perfect. And it's going to take continued effort to do that. Now, one thing you can do is, if you are seeing like bike messengers or bike delivery workers breaking that, that option, they're all supposed to wear some sort of identifying vest with the name of the restaurant. You can report that restaurant through 311. You can call and give them the name and complaint, and they'll be cited. Another option, probably not a great option, but you can also inform the PD, but that's going to be limited success depending on whether or not they have someone patrolling that particular area. So we are, every one of our offices is aware, and we're working on it. We want people to have the option, and we want to encourage people to use bikes responsibly, because it's better for everybody when they do. But pedestrians, as you said, always will have the right of way, especially on city sidewalks. So that's, I hear you loud and clear, and we will continue our efforts. And we represent Sutton Place. We have a good part of it, so we are well aware of the issues down there. We'll continue to monitor it.
Great. Thank you very much, Wilfredo. And thank you, Ms. Haft, for your question. I think we've run through most, if not all, of our questions that can be dealt with at this level. A lot of the issues that we've raised really need to be discussed further in the committee of, I'll call it the committee of jurisdiction, but the committee that is responsible for the subject matter, we're responsible for taking the issues that are raised and putting them in the proper order of priority for the board as a whole. And I think this has helped because I think we've seen some good movement, which we don't always notice, which I think we've seen some good movement this year, and we'll be able to report on that. So if there's any other wrap-up questions, then I have a quick report of sorts, and then we can terminate the meeting. But is there anybody have anything else to add? Good, seeing nothing. I just wanted to mention a couple things. We have the only issue that's been raised as an agenda item for a meeting next month was the open meetings law. And I have not seen any changes in the open meetings law or any discussion of how we're going to be dealing with the open meetings law after the pandemic restrictions are lifted. So I suggest that we not do that until we have more information to rely on. I don't have any other agenda items for that meeting and would say that maybe we should just, because it's the June meeting and nothing we did would be acted on until the fall, maybe we can just skip the June meeting. Is there anyone who has something they'd like to raise as a June meeting item?
I just think maybe informally, if we don't want to do a resolution, we should request that the elected officials continue the Zoom meeting, because I think, as I said in the last meeting, it allows a lot more access to a much greater variety of people.
Yeah, I think
single mothers, you name it. I mean, it's everybody that can. Anybody that has access to a computer, obviously, but
yeah,
I think it's something we should continue to pursue and make the elected officials aware of the fact that, if you really want to get a scope of the people who are in the district and who can, speak with a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas, continuing the Zooms and making it available to the public is a much better solution. Thank God for the technology.
Well, good. I think we should all be aware of any developments that we see, and we'll definitely be bringing it back to the committee for a discussion at a later date. But for now, when I go to the exec meeting next, I guess it's 2 weeks. Thank you, B. I'll just say that we will not be having a meeting in June. But because of that, or related to that, is I may need to call a meeting in August. I'm going to try not to, but if we feel we need the extra time to process some of the budget requests or the additions to the district needs statement, that has to be voted on in October at full board. So if we need the extra time, we'll have the extra meeting. Because just one meeting to do that is sometimes a little bit prohibitive, but we'll see what we can do. Just wanted to give you a heads up. It, of course, would be a Zoom meeting, so you can, if you're out in Montauk, you can still sign in if you're crazy enough to do that. Okay, is there, that's the extent of my report. Is there, let's see, let me catch up with my script here.
Move to adjourn.
Yeah, I think that comes next. Let me see if, and I should ask if there's any new or old business. Okay, then I heard a motion to adjourn from Jim Collins. Motion does not require a second. If there are no objections, we will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Seeing no objections, the meeting is adjourned at 8:05.
Take care, Rick.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.